Okay, let's unpack this. For what feels like, well, for decades, the dietary playbook for heart health has had a very clear villain.
A really clear one.
Beef. You know, the standard advice, the stuff we've heard forever, has been to cut way back on red meat if you want to protect your heart.
Right. Limit it or even just avoid it altogether.
But what if what if it's just too simplistic? What if the real issue isn't beef itself, but the whole nutritional environment you eat it in?
That is the critical question. And our mission today is to do a deep dive into some sources, specifically a really well-controlled Penn State study that goes right at that assumption.
Okay.
And to really get it, we have to start with this one specific marker that was at the absolute core of their investigation. It's called trimethylamine N-oxide.
Or TMAO.
Exactly, TMAO.
I've heard that acronym a lot in nutrition circles, but break it down for us. What exactly is it?
It's a fascinating compound. So your gut bacteria, they metabolize certain nutrients that are really common in animal products, red meat for sure, but also some seafood. Well, after that initial step in the gut, the liver produces TMAO. And here's the kicker. Observational studies consistently show that higher blood levels of TMAO are linked to a much higher risk for serious cardiovascular events.
So it's not just like a random marker. It's thought to be actively harmful.
Precisely. The theory is that it messes with how our bodies manage cholesterol. It might even, directly help build up that plaque in the arteries.
Hardening the arteries.
Yeah. So the risk signal is definitely real. The question these researchers wanted to answer wasn't if beef can lead to TMAO, we know it can. The question was, can you completely change the context of the diet and maybe stop that from happening?
That sets the stage perfectly. So this deep dive is all about this one study that tested 4 different diets, playing with both the amount of beef and the past quality, to see if lean, unprocessed beef could actually fit into a healthy Mediterranean diet without raising this really important risk signal.
And you should get ready, because the results are genuinely surprising.
All right, so if you really want to figure out the effect of one thing in a diet, like beef, you have to separate it from everything else, right?
Right.
From a person's lifestyle, their genetics.
You need a gold standard study design. And that's exactly what they used here.
What are we talking about?
It's a crossover-controlled feeding trial. This is as good as it gets for nutritional research. They took 30 young, pretty healthy adults.
Okay.
And here's the crucial part. Every single one of those participants ate all 4 of the diets, each for a 4-week period.
So 4 weeks on diet A, then a break, then 4 weeks on diet B, and so on.
Exactly. By making every person their own control, you basically cancel out all that individual noise, genetics, exercise habits, all of it.
So what you're left with is a very, very clean signal about what the diet itself is doing.
A very clean signal.
Okay, so let's define these 4 diets, because the contrast between them is the whole point. The first one was the baseline, the control group.
Right, the average American diet, or AAD.
And what does that look like?
It was designed to, mimic how a lot of people in the U.S. actually eat. So pretty high in carbs, lower in protein, and really low in the good stuff.
Like olive oil, fruits, vegetables.
Exactly. Which means it was, by design, high in saturated fat. And this diet included 2.5 ounces of regular beef every day.
And by regular, you mean higher fat.
Yeah, we're talking about cuts with more than 10% fat. So think of that as the environment. Low fiber, lots of processed carbs, saturated fat. That's the bar they had to clear.
Okay, so that's the baseline. Then you have the 3 test diets, which were all based on a Mediterranean-style pattern.
Right, and this just flips the script completely. It's actually higher in total fat, 41%, but that fat is coming from much healthier sources.
Olive oil, nuts.
Exactly. And a huge emphasis on fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. But here's the variable they were testing. The beef in all 3 of these Mediterranean diets was lean or extra lean.
So less than 10% fat, maybe even less than 5.
Correct. They were basically asking, if we fix everything else in the diet, can beef still be part of it? And they tested 3 different amounts to see what the portion size did.
What were the levels?
The lowest was meant to reflect, a more traditional Mediterranean culture where meat is almost just a seasoning. It was only 1/2 ounce of lean beef a day.
1/2 ounce? That's tiny. Like a sugar cube's worth?
Honestly? Yeah. Then they tested the exact same amount as the American diet, 2.5 ounces, but they used the lean cut instead of the regular one.
So that's a direct comparison of quality with quantity being the same.
A perfect comparison. And for the last one, they really pushed it. They tested 5.5 ounces of lean beef a day. That's a lot of meat. way more than the average American eats, but it was still inside that super healthy dietary pattern.
So you have the unhealthy American diet baseline, and then 3 versions of a healthy Mediterranean diet, with just a little bit of lean beef all the way up to a high intake.
That's the setup.
So after all that rigorous work, what on earth happened to that key risk marker, TMAO?
Okay, so now we get to the core findings. And this is where that old idea that all red meat is bad really gets challenged.
I'm ready.
The main result was this. When participants were on the Mediterranean diet, with either the low half-ounce amount or the average 2.5-ounce amount of lean beef,
Okay.
they had significantly lower blood levels of TMAO than when they were on the average American diet.
Wow. Okay, that's profound. So just swapping the regular beef for lean beef and putting it in a healthy diet, it's not just neutral, it's actually better for this specific marker.
It's actively better. But here's where it gets really counterintuitive and, it drives the whole conclusion of the study.
Go on.
Let's look at that highest intake group. The Mediterranean diet with a big 5.5-ounce serving of lean beef every day.
Yeah.
Their TMAO levels were not statistically different from the levels on the average American diet, which only had 2.5 ounces of the non-lean beef.
Wait, stop there. So you're telling me they more than doubled the amount of beef, it was lean, but still put it in a healthy diet. And they got the same TMAO result as eating half that amount of fattier beef in an unhealthy diet.
That is exactly what the data showed. The conclusion the researchers came to was that the dietary quality was more important than the quantity of lean beef they ate, at least within these amounts.
It was the shift away from the American diet that mattered most.
Right. It was getting rid of the high saturated fat and low fiber and adding in all the vegetables and healthy fats that seemed to provide this protective effect.
That really changes how we should think about how TMAO is even generated. It's like the researchers are implying that maybe the saturated fat and the lack of fiber are the real villains here, and the lean meat is almost a bystander if the rest of the diet is good.
That's a very reasonable way to interpret it. I mean, the takeaway isn't just about TMAO. It's that when people are eating reasonable amounts of lean, unprocessed beef within a truly high-quality diet, you just shouldn't expect this specific risk marker to go up.
And that leads us right into the gut health findings, which I think kind of connect the dots on why this might be happening.
Absolutely. So remember, the gut microbiome is where this whole process starts. The bacteria are what turn compounds in meat, like carnitine, into the precursor for TMAO.
Right.
So what's fascinating is the researchers found that all 3 of the Mediterranean diets, it didn't matter how much beef was in them, they all significantly increased the diversity of the gut microbiome compared to the American diet.
And more diversity is generally a sign of a healthier gut, a more robust ecosystem.
Generally, yes. And it suggests a really important hypothesis here, that huge influx of fiber, of polyphenols from the olive oil, all the micronutrients in the Mediterranean pattern, it might fundamentally change who is living in your gut.
So it could be selecting for bacteria that are just less good at making the TMAO precursor in the first place.
Exactly. It's like it's buffering the impact of the lean meat. It's not just that the diet is healthy on its own. It might be optimizing your internal factory so it just processes things more cleanly.
That is a fascinating pathway. It connects everything: diet, digestion, your systemic health.
It reinforces that idea that your whole plate is a single biological signal, not just a list of separate ingredients.
And it backs up what they found in earlier analyses of this exact same data set. They found that the Mediterranean diet with lean beef also led to lower blood pressure than the American diet.
So you're seeing multiple key cardiovascular markers all moving in the right direction when you fix the overall pattern.
It's vital context because the story of TMAO in the wider literature is, well, it's messy.
It is very complicated. Another review I saw pointed this out. It said that just under half of previous studies found red meat increased TMAO, but the rest showed no increase at all.
Which is so confusing for people.
Of course. But this Penn State study offers a really strong explanation for that contradiction.
Which is?
It's all about the surrounding diet. If you test red meat in people who are eating a poor diet, high in processed foods, low fiber, you're probably going to see that TMAO spike. But if you test it inside a high-quality food pattern, the results are buffered.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, now, before anyone listening takes this and uses it as a justification to, go back to their old habits, we have to talk about the really strict caveats.
Oh, absolutely. The researchers, particularly Dr. Christina Peterson, were very clear on this.
Because taking these findings out of context would be missing the entire point.
The number one non-negotiable caveat is that this only applies to lean, unprocessed cuts of beef. This was not a green light for all red meat.
Right. It absolutely does not extend to fattier cuts of beef, and it for sure does not apply to processed meats. So no sausage, no salami, no bacon.
That's a completely different food with a totally different nutritional profile, especially with saturated fat.
And portion control is still key.
Yes. They tested 5.5 ounces, but that was daily, spread out. The researchers specifically warned that this doesn't mean you can save it all up and have a 17-ounce steak on Saturday night and expect the same result.
The consistency and moderation are part of the pattern.
Right. And we also have to remember who was in the study. These were young, healthy people. So we need more research before we can say this applies to, say, older populations or people who already have a high risk of heart disease.
Of course.
The big picture takeaway doesn't change. The best way to reduce your risk is to focus on your overall eating habits. More vegetables, more fruits, whole grains, healthy fats. That's the foundation.
The exciting part is that this study shows that lean, unprocessed beef doesn't necessarily have to be kicked out of that healthy foundation.
It can be included strategically.
Before we wrap this up, we should probably just touch on the funding for a second. With food science, it's always good to be transparent about that.
Absolutely. Our sources noted that this study was funded by the National Cattlemen's Beef Association through the Beef Checkoff and also by Penn State.
And while a funding source like that rightly encourages us to look critically,
the rigor of the study design here is what gives us confidence. That crossover controlled feeding model is so powerful. They controlled every single thing the participants ate.
the methodology is strong enough that the data really speaks for itself, regardless of who paid the bill.
I would agree with that.
So what does this all mean for you in practical terms?
Yeah.
I think it means the story of beef as this simple villain for your heart is, frankly, too crude to be useful anymore.
It's about the details.
Exactly. It's the specific, cut lean and unprocessed, and even more importantly, the nutritional environment it's in. That vegetable-rich, healthy fat Mediterranean pattern. It's the whole symphony of the diet that matters.
And if you think back to the gut health part, the fact that all three of the Mediterranean diets boosted that gut microbiome diversity no matter how much beef was in them, that's the deepest insight for me.
It really is. And it raises a great final question for us to mull over. If the overall dietary pattern is the main driver for both heart health markers like TMAO and for the health of our gut, what are the specific mechanisms in that Mediterranean pattern, beyond just the obvious fiber and olive oil, that are so good at improving our internal ecosystem? Are we talking about specific types of fermentation?
Yeah.
Or unique compounds we haven't even focused on yet?
That's the frontier. That's where the next wave of nutrition research is heading.